Hi, I'm Scott Pilgrim. It's my privilege to serve as the Executive Director of Global Interaction, and great to share with you today as we encourage each other in participating in God's mission locally and around the world together. One of my favourite New Testament stories is the story of Jesus healing the paralysed man in Mark chapter 2. Ever since I've been a kid, I've loved this story. And I regularly come back to it, looking afresh at the different layers that we can see in this story. And I think a powerful metaphor for us when we think about mission locally and globally today. Here's four men, and they want to get their mate to Jesus. There's something very Australian, I think, about this story. Here's a friend in need, and they're there to help him, and they'll go to extreme measures to make it happen. Now, the man hasn't done alpha, or one of the men hasn't kind of ticked the box and made a first-time commitment, but they seem to know something about Jesus. They're attracted to Jesus, to the teacher, the rabbi, the prophet, and there's a sense that we've got to get our mate with this physical need. We've got to get this man paralysed. We've got to get him to Jesus. He's healing people. There's something different about this man. And so we begin with a barrier, in this case, a physical barrier. The man can't get to Jesus on his own. So his mates, of course, need to put him on a stretcher to get him to where Jesus is. They arrive in this town, they arrive in this local neighbourhood, and here is the house. And here are many more barriers. Mark paints this picture of a crowd squeezed in. There are people there with different motivations. Some who want to find out who this Jesus is, some who want healing, some religious opponents. But the crowd is packed in the house, it's full. There's no COVID restrictions in this story. And we then see the men arrive. Take hold of the fact that Mark says they can't even get through the door. We'll come back to that. But the reality is, how are they going to get their friend to Jesus? They could have given up. They could have seen the barriers were too great. But no, they kind of push through with courage and creativity, with a whatever it takes mentality. I love this. They see the roof, they look up, and they say, let's dig a hole, let's break through the roof, let's go through the ceiling. And that amazing picture of them lowering their mate down on the stretcher to Jesus. And as we'll see, of course, Jesus honouring their courageous, bold, imaginative faith. It's a great story. I think it's a powerful metaphor for us in mission today. It certainly speaks into our global interaction work around the world. The reality today that 40% of people around the globe still haven't heard the good news in ways that make sense to them, in their own language, their own culture. That's just not right. We say at Global Interaction, that's injustice. And I'm sure you would agree with me. And injustice breaks the very heart of God. And so what do we do about that? We seek to take the good news, just like you seek to take the good news into your local neighbourhood. We seek to take the good news into local neighbourhoods around the world. And day by day, what are we seeking to do? Break down barriers. Breaking down cultural barriers, religious barriers, political barriers, gender barriers, even institutional church barriers, seeking to break down barriers that would hinder people hearing the good news in ways that make sense of them in their culture. That's what it's about. That's at the heartbeat of our vision. If you like, we're about breaking through roofs. We're about smashing through barriers. We're about humbly, gently, respectfully, but boldly seeking to remove the barriers that hinder people from hearing the good news in ways that make sense to them. And what is true for us across the world is true in your neighbourhood, in your own backyard. We're called together as the hands and feet of Jesus to take his good news into our communities across the world and locally. And wherever we look, there are barriers. But our challenge, how together, creatively, courageously, hand in hand, can we break those barriers down? Sally's doing that. Sally, a beautiful, passionate, humble young woman from Western Australia. She's doing that in Mozambique. Coming alongside women in a Yao culture, a culture where for so many generations people haven't heard the good news in ways that make sense to them, but where our Australian team works. And there is Sally, who's developed a friendship with a devout older Muslim woman. A friendship, an authentic relationship. And friends share stories. And the woman comes to Sally and says, my cousin is going to have a baby tomorrow. There's a sense of excitement and expectation. Sally's developed a relationship. And so courageously, respectfully, she asks and she prays for the cousin, for the woman, for the baby. And she prays in the name of Jesus. That afternoon, not one baby, but two babies are born, twins. And the older woman is so excited. And she comes to share the news with Sally, her friend. The next day, Sally, accepted into that community, is invited to the house to see the babies. And there is the mum and the babies, and there is the cousin, the older woman. And this time, the older woman says, we should pray and we should give thanks to God for the safe arrival of these children. There are two chiefs in the house as well. Two of the local tribal leaders, elders of a Muslim background. And here we see barriers being broken down. An older Muslim woman prays and thanks God in the name of Jesus for these two babies, and the two chiefs stand there as a woman in their culture prays in the name of Jesus, and they want to find out more about Jesus. Humbly, boldly, breaking down barriers that people might understand the good news in ways that make sense to them. Or Ben and Petra on the Silk Roads, working amongst the K people. Again, a people where there have been historically so many barriers to seeing and understanding the good news. And Ben's an intelligent, bright young man, a passionate follower of Jesus, got a great head, a great thinker. He understands the gospel. He knows what the cross means and grace and forgiveness. But here is Ben learning in a new culture, humbly embracing the language, humbly understanding the people around him. And in that place, shame culture is such a big thing. People bound up in shame culture. And so what has Ben needed to do? Humbly, graciously, creatively. He's needed to reframe the gospel. He's needed to embrace a new way of presenting the story of Jesus, mindful of the culture in which he lives. And there he is sitting with a young man, sharing the scriptures in his language in a way he understands. And suddenly the lights come on and this young man says, and so this Jesus takes away my shame and places me in a place of honour. A sense of this man understanding the good news in his own distinctive ways, and he goes to share the story, the hope of Jesus, with others. Or Mick, who was born into a Buddhist family, and the pathway was to finish school and to go and study to be a Buddhist monk. But God is at work. God is at work in Mick's life. God is at work in Mick's neighbourhood. God is at work through Moana and Vili, who for 20 years have faithfully contextualised the good news, shared the hope of Jesus in Thailand. It's a long journey. There are disappointments and there are detours, but Moana and Vili go the distance. They're people of grace and love and authenticity, and they journey with Mick because Mick wants to find out more about Jesus. But it's got to make sense to Mick in his culture. It's got to make sense to Mick in a way that is aligned to where he's come from and his thinking, and he's got lots of questions. They journey with him. You know, today, 2021, Mick is a key leader in a thriving faith community, a leader who shares the hope of Jesus with others, a disciple maker, someone who's come to know Jesus in a way that makes sense to him, and he wants to share the good news with others. But it took global interaction workers, it took Australian Baptists in partnership together to stand alongside Moana and Vili and to support them as they have journeyed with Mick. You know, Mick's even gone on to study nursing because he wants to care for people. He wants to care for wounded people as Jesus cares for the broken. And to sit with Moana and to see tears and a smile on Moana's face, the joy in his heart as he says, here's the vision of global interaction coming to life, vibrant faith communities following Jesus in their own distinctive ways. God at work around the world, and the opportunity for you and I, God's gracious invitation, whether that be in North Manly or Northern Thailand, whether that be in Southeast Asia or South Australia, whether it be in a small country town in outback Australia, or whether it be on the dusty roads of Malawi or Mozambique, God at work. And his gracious invitation that we partner together as Australian Baptists to see people come to know Jesus in ways that make sense to him. That's what Sally's about. That's what Ben and Petra's about. That's what Moana and Vili are about. They're breaking down barriers. They're breaking through ceilings. They're helping mates, friends, get to Jesus. That's my calling in my neighbourhood. It's your calling as well. May we be challenged afresh, encouraged afresh that God is at work, and he invites us out into our communities to break down barriers humbly but boldly in his name, that people might experience the hope, the good news of Jesus by word and deed in ways that make sense to them. As we come back to Luke 2 and this wonderful mission metaphor, as we see these mates breaking down barriers to get their friend to Jesus, what are some quick principles we can draw out of this passage that help us today? Well, first we see relationship. We see authentic relationship. We see a group of men and their mate, and they want to get their mate to Jesus. They want to help him. There's authenticity. You know, when we're in authentic relationships, that leads to burden and desire. It leads me to want to help people. It dwells up within me that sense of conviction that I want to see my friends experience the hope of Jesus that I've experienced. I see it in my wife Megan working among asylum seekers, working among an asylum seeker family who've moved into our neighbourhood, who've lived through the trauma of offshore detention, the horror of that, trying to work out how to live and do life in Melbourne, in a very different place to where they've come from. And what are they looking for? Acceptance, belonging, friendship, to sit with them in our house and to share food with them, and through broken kind of conversation to laugh and to do life together, to build authentic relationship, to seek to break down barriers that they might see the love of God for them as broken people on their healing journey. We see teamwork, we see partnership. There's the four men, there's their mate. There's collaboration, there's teamwork, a core value of ours, something I know that's important to you in your local church community, something that is important to us as a Baptist movement. From the first time we sent people overseas as Aussie Baptists in 1882, we've been partnering together, we've been collaborating together. We need each other. We're better together in local mission, we're better together internationally when we stand together in partnership. We need your support. We want to support you. Mission at its best is about partnership. It's about teamwork. We see creativity. The men come with their mate, and there's a challenge. There's the barriers. I love that they're solution focused. They're creative. They're imaginative. What are we going to do here? You know, they really could have just turned around and went home. But they said, no, we're going to look for a way. We're going to do something different. And they dig that hole and they move their friend through that roof to Jesus. We celebrate creativity. God is at work across Australia. God is at work across our global interaction workers in so many different ways. So many different imaginative enterprises and initiatives as people seek to bring the good news in ways that make sense to others. You can jump online at globalinteraction.org.au and you'll see a great video of Derek Bradshaw and his team in the eastern suburbs of Melbourne, in Warrandyte, where people love to drink good coffee. And you'll hear the story of Now and Not Yet, a missional community that's been birthed out of a social enterprise cafe, where profits are being turned back into the local Warrandyte community, where people walk past that cafe and they say, we like what we see here. And it's an expression of the love and the hope of Jesus. It's creativity, it's mission, it's meeting people where they are. Derek is a former state director with Global Interaction. He's taken some of the principles, the values that we see being developed across the globe, and there in suburban Warrandyte, he's bringing it to life. He's finding a way to get people through the roof. He's breaking down barriers. He's helping people over a latte understand what it means to follow Jesus in ways that make sense to them. And we see courage. They could have failed. They could have failed. You know what we need? We need to be people people of bravery and courage and risk. We're invited to step out with God's gracious invitation to mission. But I know in my own life, when I've done that, there are times when I fail, and we've got to give ourselves permission to fail and to get back up and try again, try differently, to be creative, to be courageous. The men risked. The men took kingdom risk. They wanted to get their mate to Jesus. They made it happen. And there was intentionality. Authentic relationships, teamwork, partnership, creativity, courage, and intentionality. We want to get our friend to Jesus. We want to get our mate to Jesus. And that's going to mean we've got to break down barriers. It means we've got to think differently. It means we've got to step out in faith. And how does the story come together? Jesus sees the man come through the roof. Man, I would have loved to have been there and seen that. Jesus sees the man come through the roof, and he says, I want to honour your bold faith. I want to honour your imaginative, creative, risky, bold faith. That's what Sally's about. That's what Ben and Petra are about. It's what Moana and Vili are about. It's what our people around the globe are about. Taking holds of the hope of Jesus, never losing sight of the truth of the scriptures, the truth of Jesus, but saying, how can we bring that to our community? How can we bring that in their language, their culture, their way that makes sense to them? How can we break down barriers? It's a beautiful picture. Across Australia, we're a mission people as Australian Baptists. May we be committed afresh to breaking through ceilings. May we be committed afresh to smashing down barriers. May we be committed afresh in our local neighbourhoods as well as across the world to finding ways to break down barriers humbly and boldly, that people might come to Jesus, that we might bring our friends, our mates, our local communities to the hope, the light of the world. We're in it together. Let's partner together. Let's invest afresh. Thank you for your great support of Global Interaction. We stand with you. Please pray with us. Please partner with us. And please be in touch if we can help you and your local church community anyway as you navigate mission and break down barriers. God bless you. Go well.